What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about Opendoor. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with macro data, Monday we have a lot of manufacturing as well as Powell. So Powell is at 7 o'clock. But you don't really have to stress out or anything because based on this, it does show it's still within the Fed's blackout period. So he will not be talking about any kind of outlook, economic outlook or monetary policy. So you can kind of sleep better at night knowing that. But we do have a lot of Fed speakers, mind you, throughout the week, more in the later part of the week, so that could cause some volatility. But Wednesday, we do have mortgage applications, mortgage market index, so that could cause some volatility. ADP employment as well, so that's coming before the bell. Aside from that, it is going to be on Thursday, so we have challenger job cuts. The last time that did come out, market really freaked out because it did come in at 153,000. Forecast this time around is about 98,000. A little bit more acceptable, but still that has really proven that it can move the market. Aside from that, initial jobless claims, and then Friday we have PCE, Michigan Consumer Sentiment, and that of course is going to really move the market. So by the end of this week, the market will have fully decided whether we are getting a rate cut or not. So we're either going to price in 100% or it's going to go back down to most likely 70 or 50%. Currently going into this upcoming week, 86.4% likelihood of a 25 basis point cut. This would be huge for a lot of growth stocks, Opendoor, and everything else. And interestingly enough, despite what came out on, I think it was Thursday evening, which Trump did mention this right here, saying that we may be cutting income tax almost completely because of tariff proceeds. That is one of the things that really fueled a lot of optimism. And if you think about it, that is huge for Opendoor. So logically, Opendoor should have really moved higher, but I think it is the technicals. That's one thing that really caused it to consolidate a little bit. So once I go over that, it'll make a little bit more sense, but there isn't anything planned for this week. So no fireside chats, no interviews, even on social media, nothing really speculative in nature has come out. Looking at shorts, so going into this week, 14.14% of the free float is being shorted. Works out to be 110.65 million shares overall are being shorted. Cost to borrow minimum is negative, so negative 0.13%. Meaning that there is brokers out there physically paying people to short Opendoor. And I normally don't like to wear the tinfoil hat and shout mother of all short squeeze and all that kind of jazz that a lot of individuals love to do, but I like to look at the data. So a lot of you kind of generally know that from watching my channel, but there is some signs of potentially naked shorting. I know it's very difficult to prove, but shares on loan right now is sitting at 101 million and change. Right now, 110 million shares is being shorted. So there is more shares being shorted than on loan. So this technically, for face value right now, does show that there is some naked shorting happening. So do with that information what you will. So let me know your viewpoint on that. But aside from that, from a bull standpoint for the options, you see a consensus for it to be roughly around that 8 to 850. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub kind of 7 for the most part. So again, this week is going to be a big week. One thing that did happen on Friday, though, even though the market closed early, you did have a lot of institutions selling. So anything with a bid is a sell. So for whatever reason, institutions wanted to sell out. And again, as I mentioned, I do believe a lot of that could be because of the technicals. So I'll go over that in a second. But with it, ultimately at 770, it is trading between this pivot and this S1. So 657 is going to be a strong support. So if it does consolidate, quite significantly, that's going to be something to watch for. Even worst case scenario, I don't really see that being on the table though this week, in my opinion. But 790, that's going to be the next strong target / resistance. And in my opinion, once it does go through a certain kind of shorter consolidation period, that'll be the next target, followed by 922. So by the end of the week, if the market starts to price in a 25 basis point cut, that could potentially be on the table, so 922, so just watch for that. Aside from that though, as I mentioned on the technicals, it did try for the last 4 consecutive trading days, so on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Friday, all bounced off of that 50-day moving average. Friday was the most optimistic, so it did actually fully break above that, but unfortunately it was kind of dragged down later part in the day. So that 50-day moving average is a very big deal for a lot of growth stocks and just a lot of speculative stocks. So Opendoor definitely falls under that category. Normally what does happen is every time a stock tries to break past whether it be support or resistance, it's the exact same thing, a couple times, it causes some consolidation. So this is where I do feel some institutions were selling on Friday because of that. Because the fact that it did fail to get above that 50-day moving average, signaling you might see some consolidation to, let's say, that 10-day moving average, and that's sitting at 738. So potentially that could happen, but like I said, I think given all the data that is coming out this week, after the initial consolidation, you might see a nice push higher. So that's just how I see this week playing out. There really hasn't been that much in articles really talking about Opendoor. Same thing as I mentioned, no speculative topics. Kaz has been quiet on social media. He's been kind of talking more about family, coinciding with Thanksgiving and stuff like that, which happy Thanksgiving to all the Americans out there. Hopefully everyone had a fun time and stuff. But yeah, there's been nothing. So I think management has their head down, really grinding. So that's always a positive thing that you want to really see. But there hasn't been any articles or any real kind of analyst ratings on a side note. So let me know your general thoughts on Opendoor. As I've mentioned, I know people don't like when I say this, but kind of funny, when it was at $6, I was giving a example that if you were to buy a call for, let's say, $7.50, that's where your target is, you'd make probably 2 to possibly even 3x that you did if you just bought common stock. So in times of fear, and you're kind of going against the market sentiment, if you're looking at buying a call, so for instance, if you feel, let's say, about $8 is on the table, and that represents a 3.9% upside from where we are now, if you feel that's on the table by January, you can, actually that's a bad example, but let's say if you feel $9 is on the table, then this is where you can make 39.5% versus 16.8% with common stock. So very advantageous to look at call options, or again, if you're bearish, you can always look at puts, but definitely consider looking at options. So let me know your general thoughts on all that. One final thing, if you are looking for some solid on-point signals, buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, pop over to my Patreon. I put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades, worthwhile to pop over there and check that out. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.